This woman was caught on camera doing something deeply disturbing to win a chess match. Earlier this year, Russian pro chess player Amina Abakarova apparently needed a way to knock her opponent out of a tournament. So she decided to go to the extreme and poison the woman, 30-year-old Ume Osmanova, in what's being treated as an assassination attempt. Amina poured mercury from a thermometer onto the victim's chessboard before her next match and smeared it all over her side of the board with one of the pieces. Osmanova said she began feeling unwell during her match 30 minutes later, complaining of sudden severe nausea and dizziness, prompting an immediate call for medical assistance. After the security footage was reviewed by authorities, Amina had no choice but to confess to the murder attempt. Osmanova ended up making a full recovery, as the attacker was banned from future chess competitions and stripped of her previous titles. Abakarova now potentially faces several years in Russian prison for the senseless attack. In 1978, Hustler magazine owner Larry Flynt was shot in the spine by a white supremacist serial killer, who was apparently outraged by an interracial photo shoot in one of the magazine editions. Flynt survived the murder attempt but was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Years later, Flynt pleaded for his attacker to be spared from execution, saying, "A government that forbids killing among its citizens should not be in the business of killing people itself." But with up to 22 total victims and the desire to start a race war, the serial killer was eventually put to death by lethal injection. Around 1:30 a.m. in August of 2021, a woman wearing only a bra and leggings was captured on a trail cam in a remote North Carolina forest. 3 hours later, she was captured again, this time walking much slower with a noticeable limp. 6 months later, the woman's remains were found in the same area, still wearing the same clothing. Despite all efforts to identify her, the woman remains a complete mystery to this day. Earlier this week, New York State officials raided the home of social media star Peanut the squirrel and seized him from their owners before tragically euthanizing their beloved pet. Peanut was a rescue squirrel who was taken in more than 7 years ago by animal refuge owner Mark Longo. Having lost half its tail in a severe attack, Peanut wasn't adept enough to survive in the wild, so Longo decided to care for the squirrel in his home, eventually turning him into an adorable online sensation. According to reports, the state's DEC received multiple anonymous complaints about Peanut before showing up to Longo's home with at least 6 officers to confiscate the pet along with their rescue raccoon named Fred. The scumbag DEC claimed that it's illegal to keep young wildlife as pets since they're not well suited for life in captivity and may carry viruses. Upon hearing about Peanut and Fred's deaths, Longo tearfully posted that he was in deep shock and grief since Peanut was the best thing that ever happened to us. In November of '99, the girlfriend of Panthers wide receiver Ray Caruth was shot 4 times and later died in the hospital. It was soon determined that her NFL boyfriend had hired a hitman to kill her after she reportedly refused to abort their baby. The baby ended up surviving, and Caruth went to prison for 19 years before being released in 2018. During a tense pro basketball game in 1992, Serbian player Boban Jankovic was frustrated with a foul call and slammed his head into a padded concrete post. He immediately dropped to the floor and was never able to walk again after badly damaging his spinal cord. Earlier this year, 44-year-old Pennsylvania man John Matthew Chapman was sentenced to life in prison after driving his girlfriend across the country and luring her into a Nevada desert for a bondage photo shoot. He then bound her to a signpost with zip ties, taped her mouth and nose shut, and watched as she died. Lead singer of the Ramones, Joey Ramone, was born with a parasitic twin growing out of his back that was later removed through surgery. Joey was also diagnosed with OCD, schizophrenia, and Marfan syndrome, resulting in his frail health and striking physique. On the day of his assassination, at least 9 of JFK's Secret Service agents were recovering from an all-night bender that ended at 5 a.m. Their hangovers combined with sleep deprivation may have played a crucial role in the agents' inabilities to respond after the first shot. When 13-year-old Noah Crooks called 911 after murdering his mother, he told the operator, "I tried to grape her. I tried to grape her, but I couldn't do it." When 1930s musician Ross Colombo was accidentally shot and killed by his best friend, his siblings went to great lengths to hide the news from his mother, who suffered from a serious heart condition. They wrote fake letters to her and played records to simulate his radio show. This continued on for a decade until she passed away in 1944. American actor and model John Eric Hexum was once seen as the next big thing in Hollywood due to his charming looks, charisma, and radio voice. But in 1984, he died on the set of the TV show Cover Up after accidentally discharging a blank cartridge into his skull. Hexum had apparently been playing Russian roulette with a prop gun during a break in filming, and the muzzle blast caused enough blunt force trauma to fracture a piece of his skull that propelled into his brain. Serial killer Israel Keyes went the extra mile to ensure that he would never be detected. He had no preferred victim type and never killed in the same area twice. For one murder, he flew to Chicago and drove 1,000 miles all the way to Vermont in a rental car, then used a murder kit he'd hidden there 2 years prior. When shopping on his murder trips, he always kept his phone turned off and only ever paid in cash. But Keyes was caught in 2012 after using a victim's credit card when he didn't have any cash on hand. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body, locked herself in a bathroom, and turned the gun on herself. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. The father of physics, Max Planck, lived a life that was filled with tragedy. His wife died young, his oldest son died in World War I, his 2 twin daughters both died while giving birth, and his second son was executed by Nazi Germany because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. After reportedly losing custody of her kids for child cruelty, 36-year-old Florida woman Tara Sykes managed to communicate with her 10-year-old daughter through Roblox and used the online game's chat feature to encourage the girl to murder her 2-month-old sibling. The woman allegedly instructed her daughter to drop the baby on a hard tile floor, scald him in boiling hot water, and drown him in the bathtub. The infant suffered serious injuries after being dropped on the floor, but thankfully survived. Sykes also instructed the girl to kill her temporary guardians by slitting their throats as they slept and dousing their sheets with aerosol spray before setting them on fire. The 10-year-old girl doused the sheets but was unable to carry out the rest of the instructions. The disturbing messages were eventually uncovered during an investigation, and Sykes is facing a multitude of charges. The child allegedly told authorities that she's terrified of her mother and thought the woman would kill her if she didn't follow the instructions. According to Hinduism, the Yamuna River is considered a river of heaven and is believed to cleanse the mind of sin. Every year, thousands of people drink from and bathe in the water despite its toxic foam, which is the result of poorly treated sewage that's constantly dumped directly into the river. Various chemicals in the foam are known to have many negative health effects, including skin irritation, hair loss, breathing issues, and brain damage. Earlier this year, a former model and Miss Switzerland finalist was allegedly murdered by her husband, who then reportedly dismembered her body and pureed her remains in a blender. In 1947, there was a case in Louisiana where a young man failed to die during a botched electric chair execution, so his lawyers tried to argue that he had already been executed and that it was cruel to go through it a second time. After much deliberation, the Supreme Court eventually ruled against him, and the man was successfully executed by electric chair the next year. This man accidentally entered the real-life backrooms and was found dead 3 weeks later. In January of 2017, 71-year-old Bernard Gore was supposed to meet his wife and daughter at a Westfield mall in Sydney, Australia, but never showed up. He'd apparently been doing some shopping on his own before they showed up, then completely disappeared without a trace. After frantically searching for her husband who suffered from dementia, Angela Gore filed a missing persons report with local authorities. Bernard was last seen by a store clerk who said the man looked confused on the morning of his disappearance. Investigators were initially hopeful when surveillance footage showed Bernard walking towards a fire escape, but they didn't realize that through the exit was a complete labyrinth of stairwells, confusing hallways, and self-locking doors. In fact, the entire fire escape stretches for 8 miles, and numerous mall shoppers have been lost down there before, with one woman describing it as a maze from a nightmare. Accordingly, it took police 3 weeks to finally locate Bernard's lifeless body in the stairwell. He was likely wandering around the fire escape for up to an entire week before eventually succumbing to natural causes. Bernard's death was officially ruled the result of a misadventure. Last September, 39-year-old Florida mom Kathy Griffith was brutally stabbed to death by her teenage son Colin. He called 911 saying, "I had a very, very long fight with my mom. She fell on a knife and she's bleeding from the neck." Police arriving at the scene described Colin as showing zero emotion, and the first thing he said to them was, "I know my rights." This all transpired just 1 year after Colin was charged with fatally shooting his divorced father Charles, but was released on the claim of self-defense. Kathy trusted her son at the time and even bailed him out of jail. Leading up to Kathy's murder, Colin had reportedly threatened to kill his mother many times, but she continued to love him unconditionally. He was said to be a very spoiled child who had been in and out of mental facilities for years after being diagnosed with PTSD. According to reports, Colin developed this after being held captive by his father for over 1,000 days without human contact upon telling his dad that he was gay. Colin has been charged with first-degree murder, as prosecutors have described him as a violent murderer who must be kept separate from civil society. Kim Jong-un's older brother Kim Jong-Nam was supposed to be the next heir to North Korea's throne, but he's believed to have lost his position at the age of 30 after trying to get into Disneyland Japan with a fake passport. Because of the embarrassment he caused his father, Jong-nam was exiled from the country and later assassinated by the North Korean government after many failed attempts. In 2006, 27-year-old Ohio State medical student Brian Schaefer entered a bar with some friends. After security cams recorded him entering through the bar's only public entrance, Schaefer was never seen exiting the bar and has not been seen nor heard from since. Here's an example of a pillory, which was used as a form of capital punishment in 19th century China. The man in the photo can't reach his face with his hands, so he must rely on pedestrians to feed him and give him water like a dog. The device also made it incredibly hard to sleep comfortably, essentially torturing the prisoner until they died from starvation. Pat Morita, the actor who played Mr. Miyagi, spent the first 9 years of his life in a hospital due to tuberculosis. After undergoing extensive surgery and finally learning how to walk, he was sent to a Japanese internment camp in Arizona. During the 4th century BC in Nordlingen, Germany, this 9-year-old boy became severely disabled following a leg infection, was killed by a blow to the head, then thrown into a grain silo that was reused as a garbage pit. A Queen's Guard horse named Obelisk used to lure in pigeons by dropping oats from his mouth. When they got close enough to him, he would brutally stomp them to death. Obelisk was eventually sent away for additional psychological training. Considered one of the greatest strength athletes of all time, Icelandic powerlifter John Paul Sigmarsson once famously said, "There's no reason to be alive if you can't do deadlift." A few years later, at the young age of 32, he died of an aortic rupture while deadlifting in his gym. In 2021, Tessica Brown ran out of her regular hairspray, so she tried using Gorilla Glue spray instead. Her hair then became stuck to her scalp for more than a month, despite hundreds of attempts to wash it out. Brown says she felt so helpless that she stopped eating and lost more than 10 pounds over a short span. Eventually, a plastic surgeon performed a 4-hour-long surgery on her for free to remove the adhesive. Once described as a genius, Russian man Anatoly Moskvin was a well-respected linguist and historian until he was discovered to be living with the corpses of 26 girls in his parents' home. He apparently dug them up from local cemeteries before mummifying and dressing them like dolls. Anatoly's parents were well aware of the dolls but had no idea they contained real human corpses. After his arrest, Moskvin stated that he had great sympathy for the dead children and believed that one day they could be brought back to life through science or black magic. He's been forced to live in a mental hospital since 2012. The Double Rainbow guy Paul Vasquez was a constant uploader on YouTube and created thousands of videos. Even though he died of an illness in 2020 at the age of 57, he scheduled 15 years of uploads in advance before he died, leaving his channel still very active now, 4 years after his death. This is the tragic transformation of Florida man Robert Hardister, who was arrested 9 separate times for various infractions over an 8-year span. British doctor Thomas Kwan recently attempted to murder his mother's partner in one of the strangest ways possible. He disguised himself as a nurse and knocked on the man's door to offer him a free COVID jab. But instead of the vaccine, he put an unidentified poison in the syringe and injected it into his stepdad's arm. The next day, the man experienced serious pain and blistering in his shoulder, prompting him to go to the hospital and having part of his arm removed. He ended up surviving the bizarre attack, and Kwan was charged with attempted murder. Found in a jungle cave in 1867, a feral boy named Dina Sanichar preferred eating raw meat, had trouble standing on two legs, growled like a wolf, chewed on bones to sharpen his teeth, and never learned how to speak. He eventually became the inspiration for Mowgli in the Jungle Book. In 2016, 11-year-old Nebraska girl Lulu Gilreath was going on her first carnival ride when it quickly turned into anyone's worst nightmare. Her hair got caught in the machinery of a spinning ride at a carnival, and her scalp was almost completely torn off. The horrible accident damaged both of her eyes and nearly killed her. After World War II, Japanese General Hitoshi Imamura was sentenced to 10 years in prison after failing to control his unit, which committed horrible atrocities toward Allied soldiers. Believing that his own sentence was too light compared to the men under his command, Imamura built a replica prison in his garden where he stayed for decades until his death in 1968. JFK's older brother Joseph most likely would have been the presidential candidate instead, but was killed in a top-secret flying mission during World War II. John once said that he never would have gotten into politics if his brother Joe had survived. In 2014, a Jamaican phone scammer threatened to kill a retired American man named William Webster when he wouldn't fall for his scam. But the scammer didn't know that Webster was the former director of both the FBI and the CIA. When he flew to New York City in 2017, he was immediately arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. In 1740, Ivan VI became Emperor of Russia when he was only 2 months old following the death of his Empress mother. Just 1 year into his reign, the baby was overthrown by his cousin and sent to prison. He spent the next 20 years of his life in solitary confinement without any of the guards knowing his true identity, before eventually being killed in a failed rescue attempt, as was the plan if he ever tried to escape. In 1986, 21-year-old Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine, entered the woods, and lived there for the next 27 years without human contact. He survived by committing over 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area to be able to endure the harsh winters of Maine. Knight was eventually captured by a game warden and sentenced to 7 months in jail, later vowing to live normally and to never steal again. In the 19th century, African woman Sarah Baartman was displayed as a freak show attraction in Europe for her unusually large backside. Marketed as the missing link between man and beast, she was often brought out as an exhibit at wealthy parties and private events. In 1815, Sarah died of an unknown illness at the age of 26, likely as a result of her poor living conditions. Her remains were later displayed in the French Museum of Natural History for over a century, before she was finally laid to rest in her native South Africa in 2002. In 2001, actress Rebecca Gayheart struck and killed a 9-year-old boy who was attempting to cross the street. Other cars had stopped to allow the boy to cross, but she apparently lost her patience and drove into the turn lane to go around them, accidentally running the boy over in the process. She only received probation and a $2,800 fine. A Canadian man getting a rectal exam by his doctor at the hospital was observed by people he assumed were medical students. But he ended up suing the hospital and the observers after learning they were actors who played doctors on the TV show Saving Hope and were trying to prepare for their roles. A man from Alabama recently died after having the wrong organ removed during a horrific surgery in Florida. 70-year-old Bill Bryan was scheduled to have his spleen removed, but the surgeon mistakenly removed his liver instead. According to medical records, the surgeon didn't realize his mistake at the time and proceeded to label the removed liver specimen as spleen. Known for his historically cruel behavior, Roman Emperor Nero accidentally killed his pregnant wife by kicking her to death. He then found a young boy named Sporus who looked exactly like her, castrated him, then married him. Nero would call the boy by his deceased wife's name and dress him in women's clothing, while making his court play along with this disturbing act. The unsettling relationship would come to an end when Nero died in 68 AD, but this was only the beginning of the boy's suffering. For the next 3 Roman emperors, Sporus would serve as a royal sex slave. One of these horrible emperors, named Vitellius, planned on humiliating the boy in a public performance. In the middle of the gladiator games, Sporus would be graped in front of a stadium crowd as a reenactment of the Grape of Proserpina, after which he would be publicly executed. Upon hearing about this sinister plan, Sporus decided to end his own life at the young age of 19. Nicknamed the Princess of R&B, popular singer Aaliyah lost her life in a tragic private plane crash when she was just 22 years old. Despite being warned that there was far too much weight for a safe flight, she and her entourage were eager to return home and demanded to leave immediately. Shortly after takeoff, the plane lost its balance and crashed just 200 feet from the runway, killing everyone on board. In 2013, the body of 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson was found inside of a rolled-up gym mat at his Georgia high school. Authorities later concluded that he had become trapped upside down while trying to retrieve his shoes, and eventually died from positional asphyxia. In 2002, schizophrenic British artist Richard Sumner entered a remote forest in Wales. He apparently handcuffed himself to a tree and threw the keys out of reach. His skeleton was found 3 years later, with evidence suggesting he likely regretted his decision. In September of 2021, 3-year-old Sutton Mosser was stabbed to death by her mother. The 23-year-old woman claimed that the cartoon character SpongeBob told her to do it. During Hurricane Camille in 1969, the rainfall was so heavy in Virginia that birds were drowning in trees. The storm dumped 28 inches of rain over a 5-hour span and took the lives of over 100 people. After his wife died during a long route to the hospital, Dashrath Manji devoted his life to making the route shorter. He spent 22 years carving a 300-foot path through a mountain using only a hammer and chisel, and managed to shorten the journey from 34 miles to 9. 17-year-old Lisa Noland planned on ending her life just before she was abducted by serial killer Bobby Joe Long. He raped her several times and held her hostage for 26 hours until she managed to escape. Lisa got the man captured, as the traumatic experience gave her a new lease on life and inspired her to become a cop.